Now, in this video, we're going to look at what we call sex-linked traits. Now, we know that there's what we call simple Mendelian genetics, in which we have what's called complete dominance, where the dominant allele completely hides the recessive allele. So like a red flower and a white flower will only have red flowers. We do know that there's also more complex, like incomplete dominance, where the dominant trait does not completely hide the recessive trait. So a red flower and a white flower could end up having pink flowers. And then we know that nature likes variation. So we actually have multiple alleles to choose from. So we can have an A gene, we can have a B gene, we can have a 0 gene, we can end up with AB blood types. This is what we call complex genetics. But we also have what we call sex-linked traits. Now we know that boys genetically are different than girls. Boys are XY and girls are XX. Well, this wasn't discovered until a gentleman named Morgan was studying fruit flies, and he was able to figure out that some of our chromosomes are different. A perfect video to watch that talks about sex-linked trait, check it out on YouTube, is the Amoeba Sisters video on sex-linked traits. But going along with our note packet, with sex-linked traits, we have 46 chromosomes during cell division. And 44 of those chromosomes all have like what we call normal traits, like hair color, eye color, things like that. But the last 2 chromosomes are what make us girls and boys. The 23rd pair of chromosomes are what we call our sex chromosomes. They are different than the other 22 pairs. So chromosomes 1 through 44 are what we call our autosomes. These are just what you would consider normal everyday chromosomes to be. Hair color, eye color. Think of it this way. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl what your hair color is. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl what your skin color is. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl about how your heart forms. So these would be like what you can think of as being autosomal genes. These are genes that are just normal, everyday genes. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. And so these are what we call your autosomal chromosomes. Well, Dr. Morgan discovered that the last 2 chromosomes have different genes on them. The last 2 chromosomes have some of the same genes, like they still have hair color, they still have eye color, but they have genes that no other chromosome in our body has on them. And those are the genes that allow us to be a boy or a girl. Now, when looking at the chromosomes, he noticed that they did look differently. Now, what you are looking at here are karyotypes. Karyotypes are pictures of chromosomes. And a karyotype, the chromosomes are lined up according to their length and their centromere connection point. Well, once we paired up all of our chromosomes, we had 22 pairs, but then we kind of had 2 leftovers. Well, one of the leftovers looked like an X, and one of the leftovers looks like an upside down Y, or half an X. And he discovered that the cells that had this kind of upside down small little chromosome, all of these creatures were boys. And so he discovered it's the chromosomes, what we now call our X and Y chromosomes, that determine your sex. Males are XY in most creatures, and females are XX in most creatures. And I say most creatures because some types of bees, if you're XX, you're female. If you're just X, you're male. And some types of birds, XY is female and XX is male. But for most creatures in nature, XX is female and XY is male. Now, when we do our Punnett squares, it is the males, it is the father that determines the sex of the child. Because remember, according to the law of segregation, when egg and sperm get made, these 2 chromosomes are going to split up. So if a female is XX, when she makes eggs, one X goes to this egg and the other X goes to the other egg. So females, our eggs can only be X. However, males are XY. So theoretically, 50% of the sperm are X and 50% of the sperm are Y. So it is the male who determines the sex of the child. And what we've been able to discover through time is, unlike our autosomes, X and Y chromosomes do not carry the same traits. Obviously, or else we'd all be the same gender, if we would even have a gender. So the X chromosomes do carry different genes on them than the Y chromosomes. And the Y chromosomes carry the traits that make a male a male. Now, most of our genetic disorders, remember, a disorder is something that's caused by a genetic mutation. Most of our genetic disorders have been eradicated through nature, through natural selection. But since a lot of genetic traits, genetic disorders that are left are, first of all, recessive and incredibly rare, we do have some genetic disorders that are left. Something like diabetes. Doesn't matter if you're a boy or girl. That's a genetic disorder. Something like albinism. Doesn't matter if you're a boy or girl. But what we have found is that some genetic mutations, some genetic disorders, it tends to be more common in males than females. Well, that's because we now know that we have these things called sex-linked traits. Sex-linked traits are traits that we find on just an X chromosome or just a Y chromosome. Remember, hair color is found on just, maybe let's say chromosome number 5. Well, hair color doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. But there are some genes that are just on X chromosomes and just on Y chromosomes. And so therefore, these can be called what we call sex-linked traits. Now, some common sex-linked traits is color blindness, hemophilia, and what's called Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. Also, hair growth and baldness patterns are also sex-linked, which we're going to look at in this video because the Punnett squares also have to be a little bit different. Since nature has weeded out most bad genetic disorders, what we find, since every human has an X chromosome, remember, only males have Y chromosomes. Most sex-linked disorders left in nature are found on the X chromosome. Most sex-linked disorders are recessive. Now, there are some Y sex-linked, I don't want to say disorder, like hair growing on your ears. That gene, for some reason, is found on the Y chromosome only. Ladies, we don't have a Y chromosome, so therefore we can't have hairy ears. Gentlemen, you do have a Y chromosome, so it is possible that you have this gene so you could get hairy ears. But when we talk about sex-linked traits, we tend to focus on disorders. A hairy ear is not a big deal in nature. Disorders can cause situations, can cause developmental problems, health issues, things like that. And what we found is most sex-linked disorders that are still left in nature are found on the X chromosome. They are recessive. And because they're found on the X chromosome, it makes them more common in males. Reason. Males only need one recessive gene to express the disorder. Remember, express means the disorder is going to show up in you. Females have to have both recessive genes. So when we're looking at sex-linked traits, a female is XX and a male is XY. Well, let's say a common sex-linked disorder is color blindness, not being able to see red or green. Color blindness is recessive. So let's say it's little b. So if you have a big B would be normal vision, a little b would be colorblind. Now, for a female to be colorblind, she has to get 2 little b's. Remember, color blindness is rare, so the chance of having a mother who is a carrier or has color blindness and a father who has color blindness coming together is very rare. But with a gentleman, the Y carries nothing. So you can even put a 0 there if you want to. So in the case of males, males either have color blindness or they don't. Ladies, we have 3 options. We can have color blindness, or we can be what's called a carrier, which means I carry the color blindness gene, but I don't have it, or I am homozygous dominant. So sex-linked disorders tend to show up more often in men because men cannot hide it. Ladies, we can be carriers. We can be heterozygous. We can be little b, little b. Excuse me, big B, little b. Gentlemen either have it or they don't. So therefore, our sex-linked trait Punnett squares look a little bit different. It's still the same concept that you've always done, but we do have to do things a little bit different because we have to show boys versus girls. So let's use this example of colorblindness. Let's say a female is a carrier for colorblindness. That means she is heterozygous. She is not colorblind, but she is carrying the gene for colorblindness. And let's say the dad is normal. So he is just big B. Remember, sex-linked traits are only on the X chromosome. So she's a female, she's XX, he's a male, he's XY. Okay. Some people would put a 0 here just to remind you that there's nothing on the Y chromosome. If that's what you're comfortable doing, that's fine. When you do sex-linked traits, Punnett squares, it does matter if you're a boy or a girl. If we were doing hair color, doesn't matter. If we're doing skin color, doesn't matter. But anytime you see color blindness, Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, ear hair, or hemophilia, you have to draw the Punnett squares differently. Because these are sex-linked traits, you have to show boys versus girls. So in a sex-linked trait, Punnett square, the first thing you have to do is show your boys and girls. Every time somebody has a child, they have a 50% chance of having a girl, and they have a 50% chance of having a boy. So this mother is a carrier. She is big B, little b, and this dad has normal vision. He is big B. Punnett squares like you're used to. So notice, you would fill it in like this. Now, our genotypic ratios and our phenotypic ratios are going to look a little bit different because we do have to take into account that we have boys and girls. So if these couple were to have a child, they would have a 25% chance of having a female who's big B, big B. They would have a 25% chance of having a female who's big B, little b. They would have a 25% chance of having a male that's big B. And they have a 25% chance of having a male that's little b. It can also be read this way. They have a 50% chance of having a normal female. That's her phenotype, normal. Big B is normal eyesight. Big B, little b is normal eyesight. So 50% chance of having a female with normal eyesight. They have a 25% chance of having a son with normal eyesight. And they have a 25% chance of having a son who's colorblind. It can also be read, they have a 75% chance of having a child with normal vision. And they have a 25% chance of having a child who is colorblind. But when we do sex-linked trait Punnett squares, you have to show the X's and the Y's because you have to know if it's a boy or if it's a girl. So notice, if a mother is a carrier, she will have a 25% chance every time of having a son that has that trait. Remember, this is an X-linked trait. So mothers give X's to boys. In the case of the girls, the girl gets an X from her mom, she gets an X from her dad. But in the case of boys, the boys get the X from their mom and the Y from their dad. So if the mother is a carrier, she has a 25% chance of having a son with that disorder. If a boy has a X sex-linked trait, he got it from his mom. In order for a girl to have this sex-linked trait, her mom has to be a carrier and have it, and her dad also has to have it. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So again, we have a female, XX, and the dad is XY. Okay. Let's say the mother is a carrier, and let's say the dad is colorblind. So we have our Punnett square. She's a carrier, and he is colorblind. We're going to fill in our kids. 50% chance of a female, 50% chance of a male. Here, they have a 25% chance of having a daughter who is a carrier. Notice they have a 25% chance of having a daughter who's colorblind. They have a 25% chance of having a male with normal vision. And they have a 25% chance of having a male who's colorblind. In order for a female to be colorblind and an X sex-linked trait, the mom has to be a carrier or have it, and the dad has to have whatever genetic disorder that we're talking about. So girls would get the trait from mom and dad. Boys would get the trait just from mom. So a father who has the disorder will pass the gene on to all of his daughters, but none of his sons. Now, what we're talking about here are what we call X sex-linked traits. About 90% of sex-linked traits are found on the X chromosome. So that's why whenever we talk about sex-linked traits, we just generically use X's. There are some Y sex-linked traits out there. They're very rare, or it's something like ear hair. It's not a big deal. So when we're talking about the norm, sex-linked traits carried on the X chromosome, fathers can give it to their daughters, but they can't give it to their sons, because what makes their son a son is the fact that, or what makes their son a boy is the fact that the dad gave him a Y. So males pass their X's on to all of their daughters, but none of their sons. Heterozygous females have a 50% chance of passing the allele to all of their kids. Males receiving the X from the mom will express that trait, because remember, the Y has nothing on it. Ladies, we can be big B, little b. Our big B can hide that little b. But remember, guys are either B, big B, or they're little b. So males can inherit the trait from only one parent, but females must inherit the trait from both parents. So this is why sex-linked disorders are more common in males, because they only have one X. Ladies, we have two X's, so we can hide our recessive trait. Now, again, in nature, there are some Y traits, but they're incredibly rare, so we don't focus on it in high school biology. So here you can see the sperm has this trait on it. It's in red because it's whatever trait we're talking about. That's the X, and you can see the Y. So you can see that in this case, the daughters will be carriers. Let's just say this is hemophilia, which is a blood clotting disorder, which is an X sex-linked trait. So the daughters are carriers, but they still have normal blood clotting. And their sons are all normal because the mom did not have that gene. So they have a 100% chance of having normal children. So again, the only way for a daughter to inherit a sex-linked disorder is if she gets it from both her parents.